Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Nina Hamilton, and I am the manager of international programs and EE 30 at NAAEE. I am calling in today from the traditional lands of the Eno, Lumbee, Tuscarora, and Shakori, which we also call Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And we will each be going through and acknowledging the traditional lands that we are calling in from, but I really encourage you all to also use this moment to recognize the ancestral lands that you're residing on, but also really recognize the incredible stewardship that these Indigenous communities really put into sustaining the land and the natural resources that we are sitting on now, and also recognizing the history and impact of white settlement in your area, and also the continued privilege that white settlers still have today, at least in the US. So if you haven't already, I do encourage you to check out nativelands.ca, and I'll put that in the chat in a second. It's a great way to see which native lands you are sitting on. But I also encourage you to not stop there. The site has a lot of great resources about territory awareness and things that you can do beyond a land acknowledgement and beyond just learning about whose ancestral lands you are on. So with all of that said, I'm really excited to kick off this session all about approaches to building a more inclusive environmental movement, and to introduce you to some of our awesome EE 30 changemaker grantees who are working on just that. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with the program, EE 30 is our global youth leadership program, where each year we recognize 30 young leaders around the world who are showing amazing leadership in EE. And for the last 2 years, with support from Wells Fargo, we have been able to support 2 cohorts of changemaker grantees, where we've offered small grants along with professional development to some of our alumni. And it's been amazing to see some key themes emerge, as I have with just some of our grantees that you'll hear from today, and to really see different approaches to achieve pretty similar objectives all being implemented around the world. And so one of these themes has been a focus on building representation, and really building an inclusive movement and an inclusive field, and improving representation in environmental careers. And so Symone, Ciarra, Connel, and Erinn are all going to share a little bit about their work. And then after we hear from each of them, we will have time for questions. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat throughout, and we will get to them at the end. And some of our, and Symone, Connel, and Erinn, and Ciarra may be responding to some of you in the chat as well. And now before I turn it over to Symone, we had a couple questions that we invite you to reflect on throughout all of our presentations here today. So first, what is one way that your organization is building an inclusive environment? And second, what is one way that your organization needs to improve? You don't necessarily need to share this with us, but we wanted you to use this session as an opportunity to reflect on these in your own context, your own organization. So with all of that said, I'm going to turn it over to Symone.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Everything's good? I hope so. Okay, I'm not saying that you're not hearing me. So hello, I'm Symone, and I am here today from Maryland, and I want to, of course, acknowledge the Piscataway tribe here, and I'm based in Baltimore, and so my Changemaker grant project focuses on actually creating a STEM kit. They're called A Piece of Nature, and these kits aim to foster a passion for STEM learning and sustainability in youth through hands-on activities, and to encourage literacy in young audiences, to help address the STEM learning gap and drive diversity. And the reason that I wanted to create these kits was because, number one, I noticed that especially once COVID hit, that students weren't, going into the school building, and that, of course, may have affected them if they were to be participating in hands-on STEM activities that they maybe don't have access to at home. Additionally, when I was growing up, I didn't see, anyone that looks like me on the TV or even in books when I would be reading them and they were focused on the environment and on science. And so I wanted to change that narrative. And so I created these kits that include a book directly related to an activity that features a typically excluded or underrepresented audience. So it could be girls in STEM, BIPOC individuals, and all of the resources that are required for the feature activity. So these activities are ones that I create that pair with the book. So the books are always focused on science, STEM concepts. And then along with the book and along with the materials for the activity, I included a video tutorial that shows me walking through the activity step by step and really just engaging with the students. Next slide, please. Each of the kits focus on a different area of STEM. And so the first kit that I released focused on meteorology. It was a book called The Meteorologist and Me by Brittany Shipp. And I list out, the recommended age and grade level. Also, with this first one, I focused on providing Maryland early learning standards. And you'll see that as I started to move through this process, I started to refine some of my approaches. So with this particular kit, it was really nice. The kids got to create a sun catcher. If you go to the next slide, you can see the sun catcher that one of the kids got to create. The kids are, of course, welcome to anyone who wants to use them. And what we noticed though is that I wasn't getting as many responses back from parents to send to send photos. I did get a decent number of photos, but not as many as I wanted. We typically release 50 of these kits, and I definitely did not get 50 responses back after the individuals received them. And so I wanted to try to refine that process. And so if you want to go to the next slide. When I released the fossil dig kit, this is where I tried a little bit of a different approach. So for this one, I still kept the recommended age and grade level. I moved towards NGS standards for this and kind of strayed away from Maryland science standards. And then I also actually put together on the website, I put together a consent form, like a photo release form, a place for everyone to upload their photos, and for the parents or guardians or adults that are working with the students to ask them questions so I can get feedback on the kits. And this, I think, was a really great way for me to be able to get the feedback and the photos that I could then use to help drive the next round of kits that were released. The thing that I think was really interesting also is that there were a number of people who wanted to request kits, but didn't feel that they identified within the target audience. And so I was actually encouraged to create a donate option so that I could still provide my 50 kits for free to the target audience. But if there were additional kits that individuals wanted, that I could still give them to those folks. And that actually worked out really well. I think that has really allowed me to expand the audience. And of course, we know that it's not only important for individuals to see themselves in this in this work, in media, in books, when it comes to science and when it comes to STEM, but it's also important for them for individuals to see people who don't look like them, right? So that they can understand that this is a collaborative effort, that everyone belongs in this space. So that is also why I'm very intentional about the books that I choose. So you can see the cover of that book there, shows kids of all different colors, all different sizes, ages. And so very proud of the work that I've done to be able to pull these resources together. We can go to the next slide. And so you can see that also these photos, I think, are trying to really indicate how important it is for us to be building these opportunities for students, because now we have young people outside. Jeremiah here in this photo, it's outside, working on his fossil dig kit. And then we have these two sisters who are actually doing this together. And that's another thing that I really loved about creating these kits, was that it was an opportunity to also build a sense of community, a sense of family when doing this work. You know, the kids could do it, you know, independently. They could do it with an adult. They could do it with a sibling. And so I think it really offers a great opportunity. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Nina. And so I just wanted to share a little bit of feedback from some of the parents and some of the kids as we work through this. And another really great, a newer element that I didn't foresee was that I was able to provide the kits to groups. So a lot of times in the beginning, there were individuals that were requesting them. But then as we started to keep moving through this process, I started to get after school programs that would request kits. I had a library system that requested kits. And so I think that it gives a lot of space to make sure that we are meeting students where they are. If they need things to do after school, then we can provide it in that route. If they need things to do at home, maybe when they're maybe their parent might be busy, they also have that as an option. And so I really enjoyed also that, of course, that the students wanted to continue doing this work and continuing working with the kids, and that they feel like they can see themselves in the book, in the video, talking about, you know, I solve problems like scientists. I like to explore like the person in this book. I like to dig around and find things when I'm outside, and learning that science also, you know, is very cool, but takes work, right? It takes time. So very excited about the work that this kit has been able to produce, and what the next two kits that I'm going to release are going to look like. They're going to be focused on different areas of science. So those are the kits. And I think Nina popped in a link to the website where you can see a little bit more about the videos and some of the previous work that has been released. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Symone. We'll go right on to Connell and Erinn.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
We sure can.
Yep.
Oh, good. Excellent. All right. Yeah, so my name is Connell. I'm a conservationist and I guess content creator, wildlife educator. I want to acknowledge I'm coming to you from the traditional and unceded territories of the Lekwungen speaking peoples from the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wet'suwet'en nations here, also known as Southern Vancouver Island in Canada. Erinn, did you want to introduce yourself quickly, or do you want me to jump on ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Erinn, and I'm currently on the traditional territory of the Ramaytush Ohlone, and that is also known as the San Francisco Bay Area. But I'm originally from Mi'kma'ki, also known as Nova Scotia, on the east coast of Canada. So great to see you all here. Great turnout.
And yeah, so today we are going to be talking to you about our roles in video production and environmental education, and specifically highlight a series that we made this year during lockdown, which was very interesting in itself, called Out and About, which we made for the Canadian broadcaster. And it's about the unique relationships. It's a digital series about the unique relationships that the LGBTQ+ community has with the natural world. So initially, I'd come up with this very basic idea for a series looking at LGBTQ+ environmentalists in Canada. As a queer identifying conservationist, it was a story I was really passionate about telling. So I brought it to Erinn. She was stoked, but she told me it needed work, and it did. And she worked her magic on it, and together we brought it to life. I think that it's a really important topic, and it meant a lot to me to cover it, because even now, and definitely since I've been watching media, queer people have often been boxed into stereotypes. And as someone who loves wildlife and the environment, there was very little to zero obvious queer perspectives out there on environmental issues. And we wanted to tell the stories in this way, in the way that we know how, through this kind of video communication. We also wanted to avoid kind of showcasing only queer identity through one certain demographic, as it's just a tiny proportion of the community that often gets all the airtime. So that's something we wanted to avoid. So what are the unique relationships with nature that we're talking about? You know, how is our relationship as a community any different from anyone else's? And simply, everyone has an individual relationship with nature and wildlife, and LGBTQ+ people are the exact same. However, the uniqueness often comes through a specific kind of slur that we as queer people hear a lot. And I'm sure many of you may have heard it. and it's that being LGBTQ+ is unnatural. And this means that we often have a community of folks who believe or think that they are not reflected in nature. And that leaves behind a relationship that can be very complicated. So Nina, could you change the slide? Thank you. So we tackled this by meeting some really amazing people. So in our first episode, we met Astraven, who you can see on the left there of your screen. And in that episode, we explore the term unnatural and ask the question, is nature queer? And the spoiler is that, yes, it is. And so we just don't really hear about it that much, as historically scientists have put their own biases on their studies. So it's often been ignored, judged, or not published. And they haven't been doing that. Yeah, they've been doing the research, but it's often not been published. So that includes most homosexual behaviors and different gender expressions as well. However, now queer scientists like Astraven are out there seeking to address this and build a better relationship and understanding of the natural world. In episode 2, we meet Jalen, who you can see in the middle. Jalen is a non-binary urban wildlife ecologist, and we chatted with them about their work in downtown Vancouver and learned about how urban wildlife and the queer community connect. And we also learned what it was like to be a queer scientist. So there are higher dropout rates in scientific fields, and we discussed some of the challenges and why we need people from the community and from different places in that space. And then we also spoke to the wonderful Tiffany, who you can see on the right there. And Tiffany helped us to look at her relationship with the land from an Indigenous queer perspective. And we learned all about how she blends her queer Indigenous identity with land restoration and wildlife preservations on hers and other traditional territories around Southern Vancouver Island. And so our takeaway from this series was that we have many assumptions about nature and our relationship to it, but a lot of this has come from a place of bias. And we want people to know that we're not saying you don't need to distrust the science, but that we need to enhance it by bringing true diversity into the conversation. So we showed real life examples of where queer perspectives are actively pushing forward environmental research and conservation. And it was a complete joy and privilege to film and communicate this message to a wider audience. And then Erinn, go.
Yeah, so as Connell described, Out and About was really a project that held representation at its core by seeking to fill this gap in who is represented as a scientist and who is seen on camera, on digital media as having a strong connection with the natural world. And of course, queer identities were a really important part of this project. But as we got further into it, we started to recognize the importance of other identities and intersectionality in the subjects of our videos and where they were speaking from and how they were representing themselves and their relationships with the natural world through this mini series. And so that said, through Out and About and through this work that Connell and I are continuing to do, we've been learning a lot and reflecting on our positions as producers and storytellers. And we've really recognized that we have a lot of power and a lot of responsibility that comes with it when it comes to who is represented on screen in our videos. And so, of course, it's important to acknowledge that while Connell and I each carry our own personal identities, our small team of 2 as co-producers is certainly not representative of the breadth of diversity in Canada where we work. So we're constantly working to build out partnerships and seek mentorship and input to help us fill those gaps in the 2 of our identities. But that said, we still have a really important role to play in making sure that diversity is seen on screen. So Nina, if you could go to the next slide, please. I think one of the main points Connell and I want to make here is that we are far from perfect, and in many ways we're still learning about how best to reflect diversity in the projects that we work on. But at the end of the day, Connell and I are both also environmental scientists, and we're environmental educators, and we've seen firsthand the diversity that exists in this community. And that is so often missing from digital media. So we want, and we are working on changing that. And we're really excited about this next project that we're working on, which was made possible by the NAAEE Changemaker Grants program. And we're currently in production for a new series on young conservationists across Canada that we think is really going to help break down stereotypes that scientists are stuffed up in in laboratories wearing white lab coats and they look a certain way, generating new knowledge. But instead, we're going into the field. We're going to have young, diverse scientists sending us videos from their outdoor laboratories. The series is focused on coastal conservation in Canada, and it's going to feature 15 young, energetic, diverse scientists who really show us what science can look like in the 21st century. So if we can leave you with one thing from our work, one small takeaway lesson, it's that environmental education needs to come from all sorts of environmental educators. And regardless of our own identities, we have a really important role to play in making that happen. And for Connel and I, that's on the screen, but for you and your organization, that might look different. But we encourage you to go out and seek how you can help support and diversify the work that we're all doing in environmental education. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Erinn and Connel. And just a reminder, if any of you have questions for them as they're presenting, go ahead and type them in the chat and we'll also get to more questions at the end. And next we have Ciarra, who is able to connect. So glad you're here, Ciarra.
Hello, everyone. Tatslahane, Monique Focus Weeklis, Cosplay Applicant Ciarra Greene. And I just want to start out this portion of my presentation with the land acknowledgement. And today I'm tuning in from our Navy Poo homelands. And I love this photo because it shows my aunt, who's a small child here, when she was there fishing at the same place we continue to fish today. And she just turned 50 years old this year. So we've been fishing this place for generations and we continue to do that. And I'm so thankful for our ancestors who have stewarded the place that we continue to call our home. Next slide, please. I just wanted to start out with talking about different perspectives of knowledge systems. And for us, Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge is something that is based on thousands of years of environmental knowledge. And so this definition is one that was, I forgot the citation on there, forgive me, but it was created and generated by Indigenous people and for everyone to understand. And I really like this definition because it encompasses what I've found to be the most holistic description of what is TEK, as we call it. So traditional environmental or ecological knowledge is a body of knowledge and beliefs transmitted through oral tradition and firsthand observation. It includes a system of classification, a set of empirical observations about the local environment, and a system of self-management that governs resource use. Ecological aspects are closely tied to social and spiritual aspects of the knowledge system. The quantity and quality of TEK varies among community members, depending upon gender, age, social status, intellectual capability, and profession, whether it be hunter, spiritual leader, or healer. With its roots firmly in the past, TEK is both cumulative and dynamic, building upon the experience of earlier generations and adapting to the new technological and socioeconomic changes of the present. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And I really like to just talk about, recognizing the diverse ecological knowledge systems that we have on our homelands, that we have in our communities, wherever you may be. That's Indigenous homelands to somebody. And the perspectives and understandings of that ecosystem, like I stated, go back generations. And you can see that here in this image of a woman digging camas, that's one of our traditional roots, and then our boys here digging another one of our roots, kakit. And so again, this is something that we continue to do, and it's not something you can look up in a book. It's not something, you can read about it, but until you go out and experience it firsthand, it's a little bit different of an understanding. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And if you can play that video, and I'll just have you remember these underlying things I talked about. Oral tradition. So I learned my root digging from my late grandma Geneva, and she took me out and showed me how to do this. Firsthand observation of the process. The system of classification, how do we know one root from another? And I really like this video because it highlights our techniques of sustainability. Digging up the root. We only dig our roots when they're going to seed. So you'll see I'm going to plant the seeds back in, That's at top. Tuck them back in so they can grow again next year. Put the ground back down. You can't even tell that it was disturbed. And that's due to the engineering of our tuchus, our digging sticks. So we don't use shovels. We use a tuchus that was designed specifically for this reason. And all of these components of TEK that are described on the right-hand side are absolutely exhibited in this video and through all of our practices of hunting, fishing, gathering, whichever it may be. Next slide, please. Oh, one more time. So I really like this quote from Dan Wildcat in the book Power and Place, authored by Dan Wildcat and Vine Deloria Jr. It is not enough to simply collect oral histories, study the language, learn the tool-making procedures, and know the arts and crafts of our Indigenous societies. All of this being done ought to be done, but we must explore experientially living in the world. And so again, we can't just talk about these things. We have to go out and do it. You have to get that dirt under your nails. You have to smell that root and hear those birds, and all those components intricately interwoven in your experience really elevates our understanding. And that's something that at Northwest Indian College, where I'm faculty in the Native Environmental Science program, we like to elevate not just the ecological components of Western science, but also what does that mean for us from our stories, from our language, and we go to these places. And in this image here, there's about 3 stories. There's one on the right-hand side, you can see some boulders laying towards the end of the rainbow. And then on the left-hand side, you can see that little peak under the rainbow. That's another story. And then towards the end of the rainbow on the left-hand side, there's another story there about Coyote's fishnet. And so all these stories have cultural values. They tell about how things came to be. And these are things that, Western science is still striving to understand, but without hearing our perspectives and our stories, it's difficult to do so. Next slide, please. And so I just wanted to share some pictures of what this looks like. This is us out fishing, or where that initial picture was shown, teaching these younger generations. You can see my nephew here, who's now in about 6th grade. All of us out there fishing, men, women, and children, all have a role in this opportunity for us to harvest the fish that are giving their lives for us. And it's the little things that we see along the way, like these eggs that we came across on the banks. Next slide, please. And teaching these generations, it is multi-generational. Here I am with one of our medicine roots. This is my uncle who has taught me a lot about our medicines, gathering some of our mountain tea. And on the right-hand side, you can see a nice collection of foods that's going to go into a stew. And it isn't just, doing and gathering these things, but again, all those observations that we make along the way, that then we can bring into conversations about why these places are important to us. And this picture where my uncle's gathering the medicine and myself on the left-hand side with the roots are on U.S. National Forest property. And so we have usual and accustomed rights to gather in these areas, hunt and fish, and it's their treaty and trust responsibility to take care of those homelands. So taking them to these places and teaching them these things is really important to share for them to understand their responsibility. Next slide, please. And this is something that we do through grants like the Changemaker Fund. We're able to promote this at a community level rather than just our familial level. And so we were able to send some folks out to Buffalo Country. And I really like this picture here because the young man in the blue with the hat, this is his first buffalo that he was able to harvest due to our support through our grants, through Nimi Punowit, Lifeways of Our Homelands. That's his mother there who's also looking at the camera, his uncle with the Seahawks cap on, and then his grandma was also on site. So again, that multi-generational learning. And this isn't something you can just teach someone out of a book, right? To harvest a buffalo, that experience you feel, that adrenaline, that hard work and sweat that it takes to harvest an animal, and then all the work that goes into after, from processing the hide to the meat, to the bones, to everything that's encompassed in that. Next slide, please. And to us, this is why representation does matter, because our stories are so, they go back so far in time. Scientists have dated the Nez Perce back 16,000 years in our area. A recent finding in the Southwest dated Native Americans back 32,000 years. And we know the timeline just continues to extend back because in our stories, it tells us since time immemorial. So that knowledge that's intertwined with that time scale is deep. And this is my sister here holding lamprey, Pacific lamprey, Hasu, older than the dinosaurs, millions of years old, and still here with us. And to talk about resilience, he is a great example of that. Next slide, please.
I think that's all the slides.
Okay, that may be the last slide. So just a last word with that is, again, representation matters, you know, hearing our stories, but that experiential learning, here we have pictured folks in our NAAEE Punawat program, again, funded by NAAEE Changemaker grant, going out and rafting and, you know, developing that relationship with their homelands and singing our songs and saying our prayers on the waters that people from all around the world come to raft. Many of our own Namipu have never rafted. And so we're providing that opportunity for them to build that relationship. And then so they too can forward those stories and that learning like our ancestors have instilled in us. Thank you for giving me time to share.
Great. Thank you so much, Ciarra. And thank you to all of you for sharing a little bit about your work, but also your own stories and your own identities and how that plays out in your work as well. We have 8 minutes left, and we have so this is the time we set aside for questions. Any questions that you have? We do have a great question in the chat. This version of the question is specifically for Connel and Erinn around career stories, but I think a version of this question could definitely apply for Symone and Ciarra as well. So the question is, any advice on how to approach and recruit individuals that have identities that you'd like to elevate when looking for people to share their career stories for an event? And that's looking beyond compensation. They are thinking about stipends and compensation. So Connel, Erinn, but I'd also invite Symone and Ciarra, maybe a different version of that question I think would definitely apply to your experiences as well.
Yeah, so I can speak from our perspective, but I would love to hear what Symone and Ciarra, if they had thoughts as well. I guess other than obviously the stipends, which is great, definitely paying people is very important. One of the things that we've been doing is leveraging our networks a little bit and reaching out to certain networks that we have around locally in Canada, because we have a lot of like youth groups and environmental groups, and it's quite a close-knit circle, so we do that. But one of the main things that we look for is a presence on either social media or on sort of websites, or even something like this on forums like this. We kind of look for people who are pretty comfortable and who have shared their story before. We don't want to just go and like cold call people who are like perhaps not overly comfortable. So we'll look at people who maybe are comfortable with sharing their work and communicating their work. One of the ways that we try to make that fair is to not also look for like Hollywood style films and like amazing. We really to judge it based on like what we're seeing and what is being communicated. So I think that's an area that we are working on as well. I know that we've worked with the Canadian broadcasters and whatnot, and they often ask for, you know, YouTube channels and things like that. So we look on social media, who's comfortable, and then work our way off that. I don't know if Erinn, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I'll just add that we have been working to educate ourselves on what barriers to any kind of online presence might be that different identities and people from diverse backgrounds might experience. And so making sure we're doing the extra work, which oftentimes means more time on us, of course, to work at breaking down the various ways that people do engage online and have a presence online. And so we're working on that. And I would also just add, to answer the question, that an important piece of it too is educating yourself on tokenism and making sure you understand why you are looking for diversity reflected in whatever your initiative is, and ideally also working alongside people with identities different than your own to figure out how it might be most appropriate to engage people from other communities. So that that is a lifelong learning process, but I think we should all be engaging with it as much as we can.
Yeah, Ciarra, Symone, anything to add on that?
Yeah, for our NAAEE Punawat program, we do provide stipends to participants, oftentimes to cover childcare or mileage, things like that. But for us, we really instill our participants that it's their responsibility to come and learn these things, and elders to come and share these stories. My grandpa, he was always a strong proponent of, that knowledge isn't yours to keep. You're just a carrier of it. And so it's your responsibility to teach it. And, we really take that to heart. And my name, Sepulchus Wheatus, means thing that causes survival. And so I have another layer of responsibility that comes with that and what I do. And I try to, help others in our NAAEE Punawat program. Cultural identity is a large part of that. So, that's something that we want folks to be proud of, to come and share. And all of our participants come as learners and teachers. We ask everyone to share their connection to the place, their connection to the water, their favorite memory. Why did they want to come to this event? And really give everyone that autonomy to have the confidence in their ability to teach and learn.
Yeah. Symone, did you have anything did you wanted to add on that? No. So we don't have any other questions in the chat. We have 2 minutes left. I guess I will just open it to the 4 of you. If you have any final, like a 1-sentence final thought that you want to share with everyone here today. Or final take-home message, if there's one thing you want them to take away from this.
I would say that the work is on all of us and the work is far from done. So keep working, whatever your position is within the environmental ed community.
I love the idea that, we're all educators coming here regarding environmental concepts and content. And yes, the work is never ending, but as educators, that's the excitement, is that we don't have to do it alone. We can inspire others to join us, to help us to continue on with the good work that needs to be done. And so I appreciate the other speakers and all of you who are here today, to learn on how to do that in another way, or in an elevated way from maybe what we've been doing. Ciarra.
I see you, Connel. I was just gonna say, that I think that a lot of times I feel that people, maybe worried that, they haven't necessarily earned the right to be able to be an educator. Like, I don't know that I know enough, right? And I think that, listening to each of us talk and listening to many of our peers and colleagues, your experience, I think, is really helpful in helping you to be an educator, right? And helping to, to help you to establish yourself as an educator and be confident in your experience and be confident in your story and, in what you have seen and what you've done. Because I mean, that is literally what grounded me and helped me to decide what I could give back to other kids that look like me, right? And other kids that I think should have the opportunities that maybe I didn't have. So just, being in touch with who I am and being firm in, in any feelings that I've had that maybe have led me to do this work too. Sorry, Connel, your turn.
Do not apologize for saying wonderful, profound things. The only thing I was going to add to that is that I think, having heard the amazing presentations today and from the things that we did, for our digital content and the other grant makers, and just in general, I just find it such an exciting point at the minute. There is some amazing work going on the ground. There are some really amazing, there's wonderful people doing incredible things. And I think that there's a lot of doom and gloom still around the environment and education and that kind of stuff. But actually there is some really exciting projects going on. And as I said, the diversity and the how that's being reflected and put into the environmental community is just incredible. That's such a very awkward ending, but I just think it's a really exciting time. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. And thanks everyone for sticking around an extra minute to let them all get their final thoughts in. Hope you've enjoyed the conference, and thank you all again for joining.